Thinking about buying the villas at the Disneyland Hotel? Let's talk about how to prepare for that. Hi, welcome to my channel, Disney Hobby Guys. Like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications. It really helps me grow my channel. Okay, let's get right into it. So, you're thinking about buying into Disney Vacation Club, specifically the villas of the Disneyland Hotel. That's the newest resort that's coming out at Disneyland Resort. And you don't really know how to kind of prepare for it. So let's talk about how to do that. Um, the first question you probably have to ask is this resort really the best for you? You have to understand, if you're buying it directly from Disney, you have full access to anything that DVC has to offer. That means you can book anything in the system, even new resorts that come out, no problems whatsoever. But if they decide to do the same restrictions that they did with Riviera, it would mean potentially that whoever buys this contract from you can only book one resort, and that is the villas at the Disneyland Hotel. That is an extremely restricted contract, and it makes it kind of hard for you to sell off your contract if you need to sell off your contract. So just be very, very careful on purchasing these new generation resorts, because that restriction is huge. Now, for the villas at the Disneyland Hotel, it's a slightly different restriction in a sense that if you're restricted at Riviera only, that kind of really sucks, because at Walt Disney World, you have so many choices that you could stay at for Disney Vacation Club. In California, you have one choice right now, and that is the villas at the Grand Californian. That is your only choice for Disney Vacation Club. But when the villas of the Disneyland Hotel comes out, that will be a second choice, and it will be a very popular choice because a lot of people cannot afford the villas at the Grand Californian, nor is it available for purchase directly right now. So there's kind of a bottleneck with ownership at California. So that kind of counteracts the restriction, so to speak, to only book that one resort, because a lot of people already own everywhere else, except for California. And California is the original Disneyland, so that it's always going to be a place in people's hearts. It's always going to be a place that people are going to want to go to because it's the original. So that restriction is kind of less of a problem because people are going to want California interest anyways, okay? So if that's all okay with you, cool. So you already decided that that's the resort that you want. The next question that you have to ask is, how many points do you need? Now, talking about that, when I had a family of 4, it's down to a family of 3 now. But when I had a family of 4, I purchased 100 points, and that was kind of just right for me. I mean, it gets you about 2 trips a year, 2 weekends a year, and this is talking about the Grand Californian specifically. That's kind of good. I mean, the average cost to get down to Southern California is pretty expensive. You're spending probably about $2,000 to get down there. So if you have that kind of money lying around, 2 weekends is actually kind of a lot if you think about it. Now, if you go to Walt Disney World, 100 points can actually last you way more. The cost of a room is so much cheaper down there. You might be able to stretch it out to like potentially 3 weekends or 6 nights. Something like that on 100 points. And mind you, you're able to bank and borrow, meaning that you can save 1 year's 100, put it into the next year. You can borrow the following year's points and put it into 1 year. So really 100 points maximizes to 300 points. So every 2 years, if you want to take like a super trip, you want to bank and borrow, 300 points is a lot. You can do a lot of things with it. Now, with a family of 4, you're kind of in the studio category, and you're going to be fine with the studio. But eventually, when your family grows to upwards of 5 or more and stuff like that, you're going to need 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and those are super pricey. So 300 points is actually not a lot when you go into the 1, 2, and 3 category. But for studios, it's actually quite a bit. Okay, so ask yourself. I mean, I would say probably if you can afford the incentives. The incentives usually start around like 150 to 160. Traditionally, I think it's around 160 is when they start incentivizing you by reducing the cost per point because they give you some credits. things like that. So that's why, like, on a resale market, you see a lot of 160 contracts, because they were probably, that's the bare minimum incentive, kind of. So, 160 points, that's a lot. That's 480 every 3 years. You can do a lot with that. You can do a lot with that. Okay. So that's another thing that you have to consider. How many points do you need? The next thing I would say is, after you figure out how many points you need, determine how you want to break up those contracts. Now, if your guy is going to give you flack for asking for this particular thing, you need to fire your guide and find a different guide. Talk to a manager, change your guide immediately. Okay. There is absolutely, it costs them nothing but, a little bit of time to kind of break up your contracts. So what does that mean? So let's say you're buying 150 points. Now, do you want to buy 150 points as one block of 150 points? Or do you want it as 3 50-point contracts? Now, you might ask yourself, well, what's the difference? I mean, it's the same thing, right? I still get 150 points. Yes, you still get 150 points. But the difference is, if you ever decide to sell this out, let's say, like, oh, you know what? Disney Vacation Club is a little bit too expensive for me right now. I don't think I can hold on to Disney Vacation Club anymore. I need to sell it out. Well, if you have a 150-point block, you have to sell all 150 points. There is no in between. You can't just choose to sell a certain amount. You have to sell the entire contract at 150 points. But if you break it up into 3 50-point contracts, you might be like, well, you know what? 150 points is actually too much for me. You can sell 50 points. Sell one of those 50 points, and then you're left with 2 50-point contracts or 100 points. And it kind of allows you to kind of downsize strategically if you ever need. Now, I've heard stories where some guys will say, like, no, we don't do that. No. You're the buyer, okay? You're the buyer in this system. Do what's right for you. And if breaking it up into, several contracts like that works for you, because you might potentially want to downsize, you need to find a guy that will do that for you, and most guys will do that for you. Okay, so just be sure you ask for breaking it up. Now, when you break it up, you might ask, well, does that mean that I get less points because they're 50-point contracts? No, because when you go and book your room, it'll ask you, hey, which points do you want to use? Which contracts do you want to use to pay for this room? And it'll give you the option of selecting. Now, if you have 3 50-point contracts, it'll give you 3 contracts to select from, and you can pull from any of these contracts. You can bank and borrow from any of these contracts. And you can book it out that way, pretty much. So there's zero restrictions. It's nothing but benefit for you. On top of that, having smaller point contracts is actually more pricey, because a lot of people don't want big stakes. They'll be like, ooh, it's a 50-point contract. Okay, well, you can charge a premium for those 50-point contracts, because a lot of people want to buy small contracts, and they're rare because a lot of people aren't told that they're supposed to break up these contracts. Okay, so I would highly, highly recommend you do that. The next thing that I would recommend is try to pay this off with cash in full if you can. And that's saying a lot, because the average contract is going to cost you, 200 something a point. 100 points, you're talking about $20,000. That's a lot of money, but you don't really want to finance with Disney. If you can avoid financing with Disney, avoid financing with Disney. Even on good credit, even on returning buyers, you're talking about 9% interest rate. That is huge. That is huge. I mean, on my monthly payments, over half of that just goes to interest. Hardly any of it actually goes to principals. 9% is huge. Now, as your contract gets, as your down payment gets less, or your credit score gets more, down the totem pole, it can go upwards of like 14, 15%. That is a lot of interest. So if you can pay it off in full, try to pay it off for full. Try not doing the financing, but if you have to finance, sure, but you better make sure that you're knocking that out as soon as you can, because that is a lot of interest. Okay, that's another thing. So the next thing would be, know what you're getting into. If you're talking about, let's say this comes out swinging at $240 a point, If you want 100 points, that is $24,000. 200 points is $48,000. That is a lot of money. Not a lot of people have that kind of money hanging around. And even if you do a 20% down on that, you're talking about on a 100-point contract at 240 points. That's 10% at 2,400 or 20% at 4,800 for your down payment, and then you're gonna finance the rest. That's a lot of money. Okay, so make sure you get your affairs in order and your down payment. Those are some of the tips and tricks that I would recommend on how you can prepare for the buying this when it comes out. Like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications. Thank you. Take care. Bye.